Every airline has its stories. Pilots speak of strange lights dancing over the ocean. Flight attendants whisper about empty cabins that somehow aren't empty. And mechanics occasionally swear they've heard voices coming from aircraft that should have been silent. Most of these stories fade into legend, but one refuses to die. Because it wasn't told by one frightened passenger or one superstitious pilot. It was told by dozens. Professional airline captains, flight attendants, mechanics, air traffic controllers, people whose careers depended on separating fact from fantasy. They all described seeing the same two men. Men who had died months earlier. Men whose final flight ended in a swamp outside Miami. Yet somehow, they kept returning to the skies. This is the terrifying legend of the ghosts of Eastern Airlines, Flight 401. You're watching DreamWave Paranormal. On the evening of December 29th, 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 departed New York for Miami aboard one of the newest and safest airliners ever built, the Lockheed L-1011 TriStar. To those on board, it was simply another routine flight. Families were returning home after Christmas. Business travelers prepared for meetings the following morning. Flight attendants served coffee beneath the warm glow of cabin lights, while the enormous jet quietly crossed the eastern United States. Nothing seemed unusual. In the cockpit sat three highly experienced professionals: Captain Bob Loft, First Officer Albert Stockstill, Flight Engineer Don Repo. Together they had logged tens of thousands of flight hours. If anyone could safely bring Flight 401 home, it was them. But as the aircraft descended toward Miami, a tiny green indicator light refused to illuminate. It was the indication that maybe the nose landing gear was not down and locked into position to land. Or it could be that the light bulb was burnt out. Unfortunately, the three pilots, fixated on the indicator light, failed to notice that the autopilot disengaged when the captain nudged the control yoke. The airliner began a shallow descent into the Everglades, and none of the pilots knew it until it was too late. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 crashed into the Everglades. This crash would change aviation forever. Months after the crash, an Eastern Airlines captain would report an encounter that left even veteran pilots shaken. As he performed his pre-flight checks, he noticed a man seated quietly next to him. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The uniform was correct. The posture was calm. Believing he was simply looking at another crew member, the captain nodded before continuing his inspection. Only moments later, another flight engineer entered the cockpit. Looking toward the empty seat, his face reportedly turned pale. "Who were you talking to?" he asked. The captain pointed toward the chair. "The engineer sitting right there." The reply chilled everyone present. There wasn't anyone there. Later, after being shown a photograph of flight engineer Don Repo, the man who had died aboard Flight 401, the captain reportedly identified him immediately. The sightings didn't stop in the cockpit. Flight attendants began quietly sharing stories among themselves. Stories they were reluctant to tell management or anyone outside the airline. One account involved a galley oven that refused to operate before departure. As a mechanic attempted to troubleshoot the problem, a uniformed flight engineer reportedly appeared beside him. The man calmly pointed toward one electrical panel and said, "You'll find the problem there." The mechanic opened the compartment. A relay had failed exactly where the mysterious man indicated. When he turned to thank him, the engineer was gone. Only afterward did employees claim the mechanic was shown a photograph and immediately recognized the face. It was Don Repo. the flight engineer who had died in the Everglades. Other flight attendants claimed they encountered Repo standing quietly inside empty galleys, watching passengers, almost as though he was still performing his duties. He never threatened anyone. He never spoke unnecessarily. He simply appeared, observed, and vanished. Some attendants became so frightened that they refused to fly certain aircraft. Others refused to discuss the incidents altogether. Because in commercial aviation, your reputation depends upon remaining calm, rational, professional. Admitting you had seen a ghost could end a career, which makes one question impossible to ignore. Why were trained airline professionals risking everything by telling these stories? Don Repo wasn't the only crew member reportedly seen. Captain Robert Bob Loft, the respected commander of Flight 401, was also said to have returned. One Eastern captain recalled entering the cockpit before departure, only to find another captain already seated in the left seat. Assuming it was a senior instructor, he exchanged a greeting. The man looked toward him, smiled, but never answered. Seconds later, the figure simply faded from sight. Another crew reportedly saw Loft standing silently behind the cockpit door. When they approached, he disappeared. Several witnesses later identified him from company photographs. Always the same face, always the same calm expression, always gone before anyone else could arrive. No one ever reported seeing him acting aggressively. If the stories are true, it seemed Captain Loft wasn't haunting the aircraft. He was protecting them. The most remarkable stories were not about ghosts, they were about warnings. One of the most famous accounts claimed a flight attendant noticed Don Repo standing inside a galley, looking unusually concerned. She approached. Before she could speak, Repo allegedly said only a few words. "Watch out for fire."
Watch out for fire.
Moments later, smoke reportedly began pouring from one of the galley ovens. The aircraft returned safely to the gate before anyone was injured. Another account tells of a passenger preparing for departure. When a uniformed man quietly instructed her to change seats, confused, she complied. Afterward, the crew searched for the employee who had spoken with her. No one matching his description was on board. The flight later experienced a mechanical emergency. The seat she had originally occupied suffered significant damage during the incident. Whether coincidence, memory shaped by tragedy, or something far stranger. These stories spread rapidly throughout Eastern Airlines. Soon, crew members began inspecting cockpits before every flight, just to make sure no unexpected visitor was already waiting. The legend took an even stranger turn. Rumors began circulating that salvaged components recovered from the wreckage of Flight 401 had been installed aboard other Eastern Airlines L-1011 aircraft. The stories claimed many of the paranormal sightings occurred only aboard aircraft containing those salvaged parts. Some mechanics insisted it couldn't be coincidence. Others dismissed the rumors entirely. Officially, Eastern Airlines never acknowledged that haunted aircraft existed. The company consistently denied widespread ghost reports. Many investigators also questioned whether significant flight deck components from Flight 401 had actually been reused in the manner later described. After acknowledging the parts were in fact reused in other L-1011 aircraft, Eastern Airlines removed the parts due to the hundreds of suspicious reports and witnesses. Yet the stories refused to disappear. Because regardless of official statements and actions, employees continued whispering, and whispers have a way of surviving long after documents disappear. In 1976, author John G. Fuller published a book titled The Ghost of Flight 401. Fuller interviewed pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, managers, and individuals who claimed first-hand knowledge of the encounters. He argued the witnesses were credible professionals with little to gain by inventing such extraordinary stories. The book transformed airline rumors into an international paranormal mystery. One fact requires no belief in ghosts. Flight 401 permanently changed aviation. The tragedy highlighted a dangerous problem known today as fixation. 3 experienced pilots became so focused on a single burned-out landing gear indicator light that no one noticed the aircraft slowly descending toward the Everglades. The accident helped inspire what would eventually become crew resource management, training that teaches flight crews to communicate openly, monitor one another, and prevent small distractions from becoming catastrophic accidents. Every modern airline pilot owes something to the lessons learned that night. In that sense, the crew of Flight 401 continues protecting passengers around the world, whether spiritually or simply through the safety lessons their sacrifice provided. Today, more than 50 years later, the Everglades have reclaimed the crash site. Nature has hidden nearly every visible scar, but according to those who believe, the story never truly ended. Some pilots still quietly mention Flight 401 during overnight layovers. Mechanics occasionally recall older employees who insisted the sightings were real. And aviation enthusiasts continue debating one question: were these simply stories born from unimaginable tragedy, or did Captain Loft and Don Repo refuse to leave while others were still flying the aircraft they once called home? No photograph has ever proven their existence. No recording has ever captured their voices. Only eyewitness testimony, repeated across decades by people whose professions depended upon accuracy. Sometimes, the most chilling mysteries aren't the ones supported by perfect evidence. They're the ones supported by people who never wanted to tell the story in the first place. What do you believe? Were the ghosts of Flight 401 real? Or did grief and coincidence create one of aviation's greatest legends? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy true paranormal mysteries grounded in real history, subscribe to DreamWave Paranormal, because sometimes the truth is far stranger than fiction. Until next time, keep looking into the darkness. You never know who might be looking back.